Hey, 1 week before Christmas, good to see you on the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University, WilMU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Berry, making it happen for you. Thanks for tuning in wherever you're watching us or listening, YouTube, social media, wherever you get your podcasts. Pleasure to be with you. And Noah, I guess all we want for Christmas is more than two Sixers in double figures as we're coming to you here on a Monday. Quick turnaround for me, one of those dual screen experience nights with the Eagles and the Sixers going on. And Philadelphia sports fans were left jilted in both of them as neither team performed up to snuff or as capable. Staying with the Sixers here, 6-game winning streak snap. I mentioned just two guys in double figures after this Bulls loss. Embiid and Maxey combined for 69 points, and the team just cracked 100. And that's very strange, Noah, because I have a stat here that says that in the previous 5 wins before the Bulls game, they were a combined 159 points, which is their largest point differential by any team in any 5-game stretch in NBA history. So a big contrast between what we had seen and what we saw last night. Did the fellas just run out of gas? Did they underestimate the opponent? They do have a little bit of trouble with the Bulls, although Zach LaVine was not in the building. What did you make of, let's just start with the little recency bias and the Bulls loss, Noah? One of those where the Sixers were uncharacteristically playing from behind thanks to a couple of Bulls runs at the end of the first and third quarter that really, I don't know, was maybe too big of a hole for them to get out of?
Yeah, so Zach LaVine was in the building, but was not
in the building, not on the court.
Yeah, but he was said hi to Rico Hines, took some shots pregame, what have you. But yeah, he's been sidelined for a while with right foot inflammation. And Billy Donovan pregame said, he's on track, but it's still an extended sort of recovery timeline, maybe a few more weeks for LaVine to possibly be back out on the court. So obviously that sort of stuff is notable as teams look ahead to the trade deadline and have curiosity about Zach LaVine and his health. But the Bulls have actually been playing really well without him. They're over 500 without Zach LaVine, and you saw Kobe White has emerged as a really good scorer who can give you those spurts that turn games. And yeah, I think the Sixers were due for a subpar outing, and they hadn't been tested in quite a while. So I think they did respond well when they initially, went down, I think 11 points at halftime, erased that deficit pretty quickly. But yeah, as you said, the end of the third quarter was disappointing. And I think just offensively, this was uncharacteristically poor for the Sixers. Nick Nurse, I think, was correct pregame to say there were a lot of possessions where they just didn't really work the Bulls' defense and let the game come to them. A lot of shots early in the clock that were unadvisable. And I think also just many of the role players who had been thriving against the Charlottes and Detroits of the world were missing open shots, right? Kelly Oubre, 2 for 10 off the bench. I think that hurt a lot. And just not a lot of contributions, as you said, besides the Embiid Maxey duo. So yeah, I didn't think it was a horrific performance by any means from the Sixers. I actually think they defended well for much of the game, but this team that had been, at the very top of the NBA in offensive rating, finally had a night where they looked pretty mediocre on that end of the ball. And Joel Embiid did his thing, kept those streaks going, scored 40 points again, but
Ooh.
a little more help. Yeah, but he was great. But the Sixers needed some other players to step up around him. And it also hurt as well that Embiid got into some foul trouble, was a little limited, when he picks up the fifth in the middle of the fourth quarter. And yeah, the Sixers ultimately did not have quite enough to overcome the Chicago Bulls. Embiid did have a decent look to tie the game with 6 or 7 seconds left. Said the ball just slipped out of his hands on the little floater he attempted. And yeah, the Sixers finally tasted a loss for the first time since December 1st.
Yeah, this is one of those podcasts where we try to bury Embiid's greatness for a little bit so we could talk about some other things before we get into all the historic numbers and the dominance that he displayed. But listen, a 15-2 run for the Bulls to end the first quarter, 22-8 run to end the third. The defense was there. It just wasn't good enough. I mean, the Bulls didn't score a ton of points, but they just scored enough to beat the Sixers. And you mentioned, I mean, the Sixers had the ball, the two-man game they wanted with Maxey and Embiid at the end of the game. And you mentioned Kobe White shooting. We didn't know that he was a defensive stalwart at the rim with both of his hands standing in between Joel and the basket. And just because we're bringing that up, I thought that Embiid says afterward he should have shot maybe that little baby jumper. Maxey said, you run that play 1,000 times, Embiid's going to basically hit 999 of them. That was the one time where he probably missed. I'm paraphrasing, but I felt like that was the moment for some aggression and him to attack the rim. And he was, rolling to the basket strong. I just felt he was a little indecisive because he got caught in that little in between area, whether to shoot the jumper or to lay up or dunk it. He does have, a finesse about his game that maybe, comes out in situations like that, where I feel like attacking the basket was the absolute 100%, trying to dunk it. When I say attack the basket, 100% right move to make, simply because he's such a great free throw shooter. So if you don't get the bucket, or you happen to miss the dunk or the layup, he's got to get fouled. There's two dudes there standing in between him and the rim. So I felt like a strong, try to dunk it type of situation would have got him either to the line. And it was a situation where he needed 2 points. So that was my perspective. But were you okay with that explanation that the baby jumper would have been a better decision there? Is to avoid that Butterfingers moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that any form of Joel Embiid aggression and anything that involves him taking free throws, that's great for the Sixers. I do think last night, for both sides, the officials just let a lot go. I think, especially with Tyrese Maxey, they seem to miss at least two or three plays where he got fouled and should have gone to the free throw line. So I could understand if subconsciously there's maybe a little reluctance of, are they going to miss another call in a big spot? But yeah, as we've said before, Joel Embiid is truly elite at the 11 to 17 footer, right in that middle of the floor. I think I even saw yesterday from Kirk Goldsberry with ESPN that Embiid is leading the league in scoring, right at that nail spot yet again. So I don't mind the notion of him having his feet planted and taking the shot that he's the best at in the NBA. I think for his development, the notion of him becoming a little more reliable with that floater is intriguing, right? He already does a million other things well.
A 7-foot floater.
Yeah, you figure it shouldn't always be necessary, but if you're
Right.
facing, for instance, a tough playoff defense that is really determined and somewhat effective at denying Embiid the 11 to 17 feet, and also nullifying him to some extent at the rim, maybe that's another little nuance of his game that
I
he
guess
could.
you got the right guy on your team to try to help you work through it, and Tyrese Maxey, who can do it off the left foot, off the right foot, wrong hand, right hand, and the whole 9 yards. So
Right, and yeah, with Maxey, I think the degree of difficulty tends to be higher. He's flying in their full speed. He's going off, awkward angles or 1 feet, 2 feet. I think with Embiid, it's often going to be similar to what you saw last night, where it's just a little jump stop and it's contested, but it's a shot he's fully capable of making. And yeah, I think the bottom line is it was somewhat fluky. The ball does very occasionally slip out of your hands, even if you're an MVP level player. And the process, I think, and the play call made sense. But yeah,
oh, it was fantastic. You get Embiid 5 feet from the basket. You need a basket, and so you need a hoop, and he's 5 feet from the basket. I mean, what's not to like?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that aspect of it, no complaints on my end. And I think Nick Nurse was right, though, that the Bulls outplayed the Sixers for much of this game. You could feel the Sixers had that extra gear and were the more talented team, but Chicago did a lot well. The Sixers' second unit plus Maxi lineup was really poor in that second quarter. And yeah, I think it's a situation where if you're facing a certain caliber of opponent, Having too many lapses is likely to cost you the game, and that's what happened for the Sixers.
We heaped a lot of praise on Nick Nurse in the previous podcast about a difference that we've seen in this team in not playing down to lesser competition. They get their wings clipped here against the Bulls in a game that they just quite didn't have it all working for them. And we mentioned the lack of scoring from anyone outside of Maxey and Embiid. Any lingering concerns here as far as going into the next game for the 76ers or this next stretch of games as far as things that might have happened here that maybe they would want to make sure don't happen or want to work out before taking the court against the Timberwolves?
I think it's mostly just what we alluded to before of they need some reps in fourth quarters where the games are actually close. So they got some good ones last night, and you figure more are to come because this next stretch is, of course, more challenging, right? You've got the 20-5 Minnesota Timberwolves up next, and 4 of the Sixers' next 5 opponents overall are above 500 teams. So I think you take a step back and you check the box of they went 6-1 against the especially light stretch of their schedule, and now some more intriguing challenges are to come for this ball club. But yeah, I think as far as the scoring balance, it's largely been pretty good as far as getting those timely, useful buckets from other players. The Batums and Oubres and Meltons of the world hitting catch and shoot jumpers when the Sixers need them. But yeah, I think moving forward, we will learn a little bit more about this team than we did when they were crushing the Pistons by 40 points or what have you. As far as concerns moving forward, Batum was unavailable late in the fourth quarter because of a right hamstring issue, and we shall see what his status is moving forward. Nick Nurse said Batum's hamstring was sore. The indications from the Sixers medical folks was that it was not a major issue, but the team plans to evaluate it further today, and we'll learn more as far as his status for the Minnesota game. So, yeah, if he were to miss time, that's a pretty significant absence. Of course, he's been a great fit in the starting lineup, and that is something that we will be monitoring here ahead of the Sixers T-Wolves matchup.
Man, playing in the 16th NBA season, those hamstrings ain't what they used to be. So you got to be a little careful with how you handle those things. Speaking of hamstrings, add another one to the storied history of Joel Embiid game time decisions, and then Joel Embiid dominant performances. Although, let's just get it out of the way, he only scored 4 points in the fourth quarter. So take that for what you will in the way the game played out. But I mean, the man can't friggin' do it all on every night. But he seems to try to in every aspect, and just so amazing. Something that came out of the Charlotte Hornets game. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but another big time blowout. But something that came out in the Charlotte Hornets game is that Embiid is playing more minutes than he is playing less than points scored this season. So only one player has ever done that, and Wilt Chamberlain. I guess that was 61-62. Do you have that stat, Noah?
It's got to be 61-62.
Yeah, right.
Average 50 points. So yeah, 50 points, 48 minutes per game. There you go. Yeah.
But Embiid's not nearly averaging that many points a game, but the minutes are not very high, particularly with this stretch of him sitting out these fourth quarters. Very big part of that, but didn't have that luxury here last night against the Bulls, but he still went for 40 and 14. And let's just throw all these crazy digits out there. So it's his fifth 40-point game of the season, his 40th 40 and 10 game with at least 40 and 10 of his career. Only Shaquille O'Neal has more of those over the last 40 years. And this is just continuing to be a situation where the superlatives just are not enough to describe what Embiid is doing. And like I said, I tried to bury some of this just so we could talk about some larger picture things, but I'll continue, if you don't mind, Noah. First NBA center since Moses in '82, and I think he won the MVP that season. I meant to look it up, but I think that was the season he won the MVP. First NBA center since Moses in 1982 to average 30 or more in a dozen straight games. And I mean, what else needs to be said? Embiid is currently leading the league in the NBA in scoring, like we know. But what else needs to be said? Noah, am I wrong in thinking that this guy is the front runner for the MVP, and it seems like it's going to be his award to lose if he continues on this pace?
I think, yeah, if voting were to happen today, he would win the award. As we said, the Sixers' schedule is about to toughen up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's premature to declare him a strong favorite or whatever. But yeah, no, he's I think got a very strong case for being the
Yeah,
most
if he got to
valuable
defend
player
the
in the league.
title, he's defended it.
He is defending it
Yeah.
with emphatic performances, no doubt. Yeah, the 40-10 volume that you mentioned is pretty wild for him to be up there with Shaquille O'Neal, and I guess ahead of players like LeBron James, like Michael Jordan,
And it's
Kareem
such a different type
Abdul-Jabbar.
of dominance than O'Neal. You know what I'm saying? Like he's
Mhm.
dominating the game differently.
Yeah, yeah, much better at the free throws. Both guys drew many, but yeah, that's as we've said, just such an advantage for Embiid. And yeah, he missed his very first one last night. I think there was some tentativeness, maybe a little, issue early on, trying to make sure that hamstring was feeling okay. But then, yeah, once he got rolling, it was just routine. He scores 12, 14, 16 points in every single first quarter, and it's wild how easy he makes all that look. So yeah, I think it is just pretty clear he's going to keep piling up this historic numbers. In the Charlotte game, he broke Wilt's franchise record for consecutive 30-10 games. So it's not just that he's up there with Wilt Chamberlain. Sometimes he's now even breaking those Wilt numbers. And yeah, I think the per minute scoring is a great reflection of how dominant he is. Sometimes he's gotten fair knocks for his availability and suffering some unfortunate injuries, but when he is on the court, it just doesn't matter. He's going to score a lot of points, and he's going to do it at an incredibly efficient level. So yeah, last night 40, 14, and 6, and it wasn't his A game. I think he would tell you that, experienced some foul trouble that he admitted limited his aggression a little bit late in the fourth quarter. He, conceded some buckets to Vucevic in that final period, and still, when Embiid is less than his A game, it's better than 99% of the NBA, and I think that is such a luxury for the Sixers that regardless of whether Embiid is at his very best, he's going to be world class for them.
You mentioned the game against the Timberwolves and the challenge it presents. How game time decision was Embiid with the hamstring? Is this something that Sixers fans should be concerned about monitoring moving forward, or do we feel like this is just a circumstantial thing for this one game and he should be good for the rest of the season or moving forward, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, hard to say
Mm-hmm.
until we know exactly how he woke up today, what he was able to do at practice, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, no, it was legitimately game time, as it often is. Saw him, stretching it out, kind of trying to make sure everything was responding properly in his usual pregame warm up window. And then we learn it, as we often do, 30 minutes before, that it's a thumbs up. He's good to go. But Nick Nurse said he initially reported it following the team shoot around. And then I think, yeah, there was genuine uncertainty leading up to tip off. But I think obviously the greatness of the performance should quell many of those potential concerns. It is a hamstring. Those things can act up on you unpredictably, and the Sixers will be cautious if he reports any further issues. But I think based on what we know now, I don't see any reason to have real worry there. If Embiid's able to pile up 40 and 14 on it, I think it's getting the job done for sure.
We'll dig into more about the Sixers team after we pay some quick bills. Of course, one of our title sponsors is Wilmington University. We encourage people to find their higher education home at Wilmington University, where your academic success is celebrated by a caring community. Explore your opportunities at wilmu.edu. Celebrity cook Steve Martirano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martirano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations for Martirano's Prime on Open Table. Back here on the Sixers Talk podcast. And Noah, we are still thinking, projecting toward that trade deadline and curious how the Sixers might play and parlay their assets and what's available on the market. You have a game like last night where their stars are shining and, Maxey's doing his thing with the step backs and hit a big three when they needed it in the fourth quarter off of, to me, just a crazy move and angle when you're coming down the court and slide to the left. And then it's just, he makes it look so routine. And I'm like, dang, like that's such a cold-blooded shot. But these guys are magnificent. But the sun set pretty quickly after you look beyond those two guys. If you're the Sixers staff, front office, do you look at that and just project toward how you can improve this roster to avoid situations like that happening? Of course, it's one game, but come the playoffs, come when it matters most, you can't afford to have situations like that. And having another star who can contribute in multiple ways, a better scorer, what have you, using some of the pieces you have here to upgrade to a player like that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like that's something that is front of mind for this organization?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Daryl Morey's open about he's always gonna explore the star market. Of course, he's recently received an extension with the Sixers and reiterated many of the points he'd made post Harden trade in his press conference following that news. The Sixers obviously love the team they have. They've been pleased with the return from the Harden deal, especially with Batum and Robert Covington. But Daryl Morey would love if a good star trade became available for the Sixers. However, he seems firmly of the logical opinion now that Tyrese Maxey is a legit number 2 star. And he said, that
looks like it to me.
Yeah, he said that, makes things easier for us as far as we don't have to throw out a bunch of assets to try to, desperately hunt a number 2 to pair with our MVP. Essentially the Sixers feel they've got that in house, and if a good number 3 is available for the right price, they would be happy to pull the trigger on that sort of deal. And Morey has also said, yes, the Sixers are in this situation where they've got an ample amount of cap space for next summer, but the team would love to do something early if that is viable for them. So I don't think the 18-8 start in any way means that Morey is like, oh, we're all set, we're good, no need to aggressively explore everything out there. However, I think the Sixers know that if a good trade doesn't materialize for them, that's fine, and it is okay to try to improve the roster around the margins and work on some ways they can be deeper. Morey specifically mentioned an additional ball handler, which I think we can all see. Right now they've really just got Patrick Beverley on that second unit as a legit ball handler for the squad. And then he mentioned as well another big guy, right? You've got Paul Reed, a young backup center here, and you've got Mo Bamba as well, who's failed to really crack this rotation regularly. So Morey did mention the possibility of adding another big to this mix. So I think they will look into all the possibilities, including some of the less flashy ones, but absolutely all the big names that are swirling out there. The Sixers are at least making calls, and will continue to do so up until the deadline. As far as anything glaring from last night, I don't really think so, because the offense has been the strength of this team, right? And it was just uncharacteristic for them to have a clunker in that regard. I think, if anything, there's been some nights where you wonder how they can shore up some of their weaknesses defensively, but offensively, it's been such a fantastic team. And my opinion right now is they don't need to go out of their way to land an offensive first player such as a Zach LaVine. But we will see what they do, up to the deadline. And no doubts that Morey's going to be aggressive, but also is going to feel that the core of this roster is very good and doesn't need to be radically changed.
As we kind of take a look back here to Charlotte and this amazing stretch before this Bulls loss and the 6 straight wins, the 159-point differential between those 5 wins before the Bulls loss. Is there anything that we should appreciate about that record that they set for the most points, most point differential in a 5-game stretch of NBA history, or should we just take it as they clobbered, lesser opponents and they've kind of overcome some of those demons from the past, or is there more to that stretch, do you think?
Yeah, I think the latter point is the primary takeaway, but no, I think Embiid has gotten even a little better. I think that is obvious. The fact that he's able to keep this 30-plus streak alive and is playing, only 3 quarters in every single one of those games, that is worth appreciating. I think their defense did improve during that period. Yes, the opponents were vastly inferior, but I think you saw some encouraging signs with Batum applying good ball pressure to Terry Rozier and being a bit of a pest with his length on smaller ball handlers. I think the communication and the cohesion looked a little sharper defensively, and I think they were able to have some nights where they forced turnovers and converted the high deflection numbers into success in that regard. So yeah, I think that was a plus. And then I think we keep hearing from this team that the depth is scary and is so immense, and you get a little evidence in support of that just with the third unit getting all these minutes in the fourth quarters and expanding leads and allowing the Sixers to build the historic margin of victory. So I'm never going to take much from the garbage time of a blowout game, I think, but yes, like Furkan Korkmaz, Daniel House, etc., were doing their part to blow up that margin of victory even a little higher. And I think, they deserve a little recognition as well.
Really quick, and I say really quick because I did not prepare you for this question and I don't want to catch you off guard, but it was a front page story on Philly.com, the Philadelphia Inquirer, as well, about the Sixers arena proposal and the scrutiny that it faced. Any thoughts there as that unfolds? And I don't need you to get really in depth. It just was something that I was talking about yesterday, particularly regarding the fact that some city officials in this official review mentioned the fact that after every event at this new 76ers Place arena, that they will have to close 10th and 11th streets in order to allow all the people to get out of the building, because of the stampede factor of people exiting the arena and having enough space for people to disperse and leave. And when you think about it, if you've ever been to an Eagles game, or particularly after a Phillies game, I mean, you can't even turn on Patterson Avenue sometimes because so many people are coming out, or the K lot is letting out and things like that. And that street, 11th Street, is definitely heavy police and stop and go traffic and all that. So you can imagine, in a busy place like downtown Philly, like all of a sudden all these people are there. There's bus routes that go up and down there. Imagine having to go home and having your bus detoured and not being able to go somewhere just because, the Rolling Stones are playing at 76 Place, and all of a sudden, there's all these detours and things like that. So much so on a regular basis because of all of the events that will most likely be at this arena. So I didn't know if you glanced over that or had any thoughts or poked around that at all as we kind of wrap things up here.
Yeah, haven't looked at that in depth specifically, but yeah, I think definitely worth highlighting that this whole arena proposal and hope the Sixers hope transition to a new space has
and
not
it's not necessarily been super smooth. Is that
not smooth?
Yeah,
That's exactly
right.
what I was going to
Yeah.
say. That's what stands out to me. I think more complicated than they seem to have anticipated, and yeah, I think the initial messaging was they wanted to hear from the community and be responsive to concerns and, alter their plan as appropriate. And it seems like there's a lot of folks who feel they're not fulfilling that aspect of, the initial promise with, a lot of protests from folks in Chinatown, of course, and a lot of lingering logistical concerns beyond some of the big picture stuff about whether this will truly be a positive for the community in which they're planning to build this arena. So yeah, I mean, I think the Sixers have tried to respond to some of this and reframe things and restate the ways in which they do feel this will benefit the area and just bring in a lot of regular business. And I think some of those points make sense on their face, but look, like, this was always going to be a really difficult undertaking, and it was clearly a really ambitious plan.
Yes.
And I think there's still a lot of hurdles it seems that the team will have to overcome if this is actually, one, going to come to be, and two, like, be something that a large amount of people are not very unhappy about. So, of course, there was always going to be some divisiveness. I think it was going to be hard to get unified support, realistically, but I think the level of opposition has certainly not been negligible, and yeah, the Sixers will try to move forward here, try to figure it all out. But yeah, the members of the community are clearly not all thrilled at this new arena plan, and yeah, it's still many years down the line that the Sixers hope they are actually playing games in Center City. But yeah, right now it still feels very hypothetical. The notion of this actually happening and there being a physical space there. So they seem determined to plow forward, work through the many concerns and the various groups opposing the plan. But yeah, lots of work to be done, I guess, would be the bottom line from where I'm sitting. And yeah, I'm certainly not in a place where I'm intimately familiar with all the details. Just trying to cover this team day to day, but that is my kind of understanding of how things have been going. And yeah, not the smoothest thus far, and they'll hope to smooth it out a bit, I guess, in the whatever 8, 9, 10 years before they hope to actually be playing games at 76 Place.
Yeah. What the pivot point will be if that does not happen, I don't know. We remember there was a overture to the Sixers refurbishing the Penn's Landing area that didn't quite come to fruition. No telling exactly how this will play out. I personally didn't think that the news that the Washington Wizards were trying to move to a new arena played into their favor, considering an arena there and displace some people, change the landscape and whatnot, and maybe it's not as successful as it doesn't seem like it's as successful as they had hoped. So, not that both things. One thing is related to the other. The Sixers apparently want to model what they have after Boston's TD Garden, but the Inquirer also sent a reporter there to peel back the layers because Dave Adelman had been mentioning that they have an arena in Boston's downtown, and that really has been successful in the way they incorporated it. But the Inquirer mentioned that arena isn't actually downtown in Boston. It's actually in an old warehouse district near downtown. So it didn't actually have the same proximity that the Sixers arena would have. But worth looking into, worth following if you're not paying attention to that. Before we get out of here, former Sixer G Leaguer, Mac McClung is back in the news because he's been invited to the dunk contest, although I think he's with the Magic organization. But what did you make of that? Is the NBA so desperate for success that they're continuing to invite a guy who's not, on the fringe of the NBA, where they have all these amazing athletes that are not named Mac McClung who play in the league, and they can't seem to woo them to play or perform in the dunk contest? What did you make anything of that, or was that interesting to you?
Yeah, I honestly don't hate it just because he was so great last year.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. Yes.
He did live up to the hype, and to his credit, he's still on the edge of the NBA. He's averaging, I think, 25 points per game in the G League. As we said when he was here.
Is he with the Magic organization? Is that?
Yeah,
I don't know the name of their G League team.
with their G League team. So, I can understand if there was tons and tons of interest from guys to play to participate in the dunk contest, and it felt like he was taking a spot, then that could be controversial. But as he said, like a lot of the stars in the league just opt against the dunk contest these days. So I don't see too much wrong with seeing, what he's added to his bag and seeing if he can repeat as the champion of the dunk contest. So yeah, apparently an invitation has been extended and we will see if he accepts. Of course, the Sixers have another participant from that dunk contest now in KJ Martin. So he's had little opportunity to show it in games for the Sixers, but perhaps he's another guy who the NBA will consider inviting for a second consecutive year. I mean, his athleticism is still pretty wild to me. Just very casually, those eyes are like up at the rim when he goes up for a slam pregame. So, KJ Martin, I think would presumably like another invite, and maybe he can take down Mac McClung in this year's dunk contest.
They put so much time into this in-season tournament, and although that was modeled after other tournament style aggregate things that are going on in other leagues, so it's not necessarily an original idea, but I feel like if they could reimagine the dunk contest in some ways, it might attract some of those bigger names and people who a lot of people want to see in the dunk contest or just displaying their skills on that type of platform. But we'll see how it plays out. And it's not worth spending a lot of time discussing the dunk contest necessarily, which Mac McClung breathed so much life into last season. So give him credit for that. But it definitely will be fun to watch. Definitely want to tune in to see him defend his title for sure. Hopefully, some other competition arises that makes it worthwhile. But Noah, I always want to give time to the website. You are so dedicated and on point with so much of your work and your writing. What's going on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com right now?
Yes, I'll give a little plug to just over the past few days. We've done this Stratomatic simulation of the best Sixers teams of all time. The Stratomatic ran this mini tournament for NBC Sports Philly. We picked the 4 top seeds, and the final matchup was 82-83 versus 66-67. So if you're intrigued to go back in the day with a little Sixers history, we've got that covered. And just continuing on with the day-to-day coverage, observations on every game, and we'll be at practice today at 1 p.m. in Camden. So we'll see what we hear on Nick Batum's status and some news and notes, presumably ahead of the Sixers T-Wolves matchup, which should be a fun game tomorrow night at Wells Fargo Center.
Follow Noah Levick on all his social media platforms at Noah Levick. For Noah, I'm Danny and Ben Berry. Thanks for listening and watching to the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works. Happy holidays to everyone out there. We'll see you next time.